So I know that Jonathan has done much work in also bringing together different stakeholders and also members and trying to bring them together around a kind of joint and positive vision. And now he's looking to bring forward a zero carbon development. So I look forward to hearing about it. Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Katja. I'm always a bit of a party pooper at these kinds of events, even more so this evening because I don't have pictures, which means that the probability of a rant is probably even higher than it was before, for which I apologise in advance. And also, while preparing for this evening, I just realised how my life has become so much more miserable. Now I'm a developer. 30 years ago, I used to be a Greenpeace director. And here I am on a webinar talking about parking. And I'm just thinking, what happened? You know, what went wrong? And then the only way I can cheer myself up when I think of it like that is that actually development, in a way, is the new campaign. It's a fantastic way, potentially, of joining conversations in new ways with communities about how we can live differently. And the built environment can really shape that in really profound ways, for good or for ill. And in my mind, it's usually for ill. And I think parking and cars and the way we move around and the urban design that we wrap around that. So, you know, the old joke, how do you start a master plan? Well, you get your parking strategy right. There's something really, has been really true about that. You know, I'm a gamekeeper really, as a campaigner turned poacher, as a developer, and just a couple of examples. So we're in the middle of buying a 7-hectare site in the middle of a beautiful market town. It's on the edge of the town centre. And let's just address the commercial question first about whether parking standards, as have been applied historically, are a good thing commercially or a bad thing. Well, this scheme, there have been 2 goes at it over nearly 20 years now. The last scheme with an international investor that's got planning consent. And for 400 on a 7-hectare edge of town centre site, for 400 homes, there are 800 car parking spaces. And then you wonder why it's not commercially viable. And so the obvious, and it has a £15 million concrete parking structure in the middle of it. And so the obvious thing to do is to, in many ways, not have any car parking spaces. I'll come back to that in a minute. Imagine how much more land that frees up for compact, fine-grained, beautiful urbanism, which also brings people together. Second is that this morning I received an email on another project, which is in for planning, about the same size, about 1,000 homes in a very beautiful valley. And the planning officer there is saying that we don't have enough car parking spaces. We actually have met their policy, but they think we should have some more. And I can't think of an easier way, a quicker way to destroy a beautiful valley than by doing that. And so we talk about silos, and I think that's supposed to be the theme of my talk. And I'm not sure we're asking ourselves even the right question. So to think about even the question of parking is itself a silo. So let's just step back a bit, and here's the rant. I do apologise in advance, but I'm slightly typecast in these kinds of things. So look, if we agree that there really is a climate problem, and if that climate problem is actually a crisis or even an emergency, which I think even the government thinks it is now, particularly because it's the way to curry favour with Joe Biden and have a new special relationship with America. We've got COP26 coming up later this year. There is a climate emergency. So we need a root and branch rethink about everything in town and country planning. Everything in town and country planning. We've got to redesign all our urban places to address just the climate emergency. And we have to be creative, comprehensive, and rigorous. Second, if we agree that there's a problem with nature, a degradation of habitat, the loss of whole ecosystems globally, and we're one of the worst offenders historically in this country, the loss of biodiversity. And if we think that's a crisis, which most statured biologists in the world believe, then again, we need a root and branch rethink about the entire town and country planning system. Then, if we think that there's a problem of poverty, social justice, exclusion, and alienation, which in turn leads to a loss of economic productivity, social costs, ill health, the whole public health agenda. Who knew that it even was an agenda until 15 months ago? But if we think that those things are not just a problem, but they're an emergency, then we need to rethink root and branch the town and country planning system and how we design our urban places and spaces. So if you put those three things together, climate emergency, emergency in the natural world, emergency in social injustice, then that's a perfect storm. And if there was ever a time to rethink the way that we shape our places, existing ones, and make new ones, it's now. And unless we're radical in everything, parking being just one issue, and actually you can't solve parking problems, as has already been illustrated, unless you address the holistic environment of which they're a part, including where you build in the first place, what economy, what circular economy you're aiming for, then there's no way we're going to address these global issues. So there's a new phrase on the block. It's from the guru, John Elkington, and he talks about exponential sustainability as being a must. And if you look at big business, if you think about renewable energy, it's happening. So we began our campaign in Greenpeace on renewable energy in the 1980s. And in the 90s and noughties, we talked about how with a critical mass of demand, the price of PVs would come down. Well, it came down 10 times in 15 years, the price of PVs. We're beginning to get it on renewable energy. We're beginning to get in big business, people like IKEA and Unilever, thinking about where our food comes from, the circular economy in big business. We're nowhere near doing it in the British planning system. And in every silo, whether it's highways authorities, urban design and planning authorities, the education of members, developers, investors, we're nowhere near this urgent emergency agenda in addressing these issues. And until we are, as a developer, when you try to push these issues forward, unless you can find, as I believe that we've begun to, a few sites and opportunities where you really can turn the dial up to 12, despite actually what many of the public bodies want to do. Instead of enabling, they're often putting the obstacles down. Then we're not going to solve these emergencies. So if you then, what is exponential sustainability? Just very briefly, it's being 10 times more bold in our social actions, our environmental actions, and with a new economic framework to address these issues. And then if we then invert everything, instead of thinking of these issues as emergencies, but we start to see them as opportunities, it's a bit of a cliche for anyone that I've worked with. Have heard me say this a million times, but it's from Obama's chief scientific advisor, who's probably just been exhumed to work for for Biden, a guy called John Holdren. He says that sustainability is really a series of great opportunities disguised as insoluble problems. And that's what parking is. If we comprehensively address good urban design and streets and locate our development well, it's incredibly liberating for clean air, social interaction of all kinds. Read Yangiel, the science is in. These are not sort of frivolous, made up ideas. This is, everyone's got the books. The evidence is there. Greener, more productive environments, the restoration of things like songbirds, less dangerous streets and roads. 9 million people died last year from fossil fuels in climate change and in mining fossil fuels. 9 million, that's 1 in 5 premature deaths from fossil fuels. We get better homes, we get better urban design, we get better everyday quality of life, we get lower bills. And it isn't about electric cars. The alpha means of movement are walking, cycling, and canoeing, probably. And we get major improvements in public health. So the upside of down, the emergency agenda, i.e. the forces that obligate us to act are emergencies. They're not, oh, we'll do it when we've changed our planning policy, our local plan in 5 years' time. These are emergencies, COP26. The huge upsides, economic productivity, social justice, removing depression, achieving circular economies, freeing up space for houses, are mind-boggling. Put the two together is a great agenda for planners and urban designers. I can't think of another agenda. Sure, if you think it's the most important thing to put a few trees on some streets, we'll take it. Is it really transforming the way that we need to transform our urban places for sustainability? Absolutely not. And so we need to change the culture. We need to change the way we think about urban places. We need to change the way we think about how we live our lives. And yet, as Matthew has said and others have said, there aren't many examples yet in this country, except in the old city centres. And some of the parking and car ownership stats that Dan showed earlier on sort of demonstrate that the efficacy of good urban design, more compact urban design in that regard. But really, there are plenty of European examples. And as I say, the evidence, the science is in, the literature is there. We need political will. We need planning to be fundamentally reformed. And we need good investors to stand behind the good developers to achieve these breakthrough projects, because the customers will follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for making a very good case for why we need to change. And I think that, we do need that change. I will put you probably in the Q&A on the spot and actually say, ask you of what you think us in the audience, us as a combined group of planners, designers, developers, and so on, might be able to do and not wait for the government to change policy. What can we do in the meantime? But I come back to you on that.
I'm sorry, you have to stop designing shit.
Okay, so you think it's the designers at fault? I think there's a bit of a debate to have there.
I just think
let's park that. We have one more speaker.
You don't have to take the work. Find some other work.
Okay, we have to stop designing.